Well, Aeo's best included setting pole position quite comfortably. How comfortably? Well, by the better part of a second. And that was some renaissance for the rest of the field. In Friday's timed session, he was 1.6 seconds behind. In Saturday morning's session, 1.5 seconds behind was the margin from Aeo to the rest of the field. In qualifying, though, second on the grid man Jochen Winkelhock slashed it to just 0.85 of a second advantage for the Frenchman. But that was enough to allow him to run just 7 laps in qualifying and sit out the rest while the others tried to catch him. As they go away for this 50-kilometre sprint race, it's the yellow Peugeot leading. Winkelhock better start initially, but then got edged out by his teammate Cicotto, and off into the gravel goes newcomer to the series Kurt Team in the yellow Opel, and one of the privateer BMWs. That's Heigert's BMW. And Team, who before qualifying had, or before the practice on Friday, had not even so much as put his bum in the seat of a 2-litre touring car, coming straight in to replace Opel's, well, one of Opel's hoped-for stars, the former champion Klaus Ludwig, who decided on Monday that he really couldn't quite see his way clear to doing the job, if it was all the same with you. One of the privateer Audis there, Klaus Nieswitz, running towards the back of the field. And here, oh dear, well, he was going to take his time to get used to the car, Kurt Team, and unfortunately he didn't even get that first corner out of the way. So through go the rest of the field, 2 of the 4, in fact 4 of the 4 privateer Alphas there. Alfa Romeo's 6th strong entry. Some renaissance of the Italian manufacturer's form, perhaps. We'll wait to see. The stronger of the cars are the red ones, run by the TV Spielfilm team, Christian Danner, and that man there, Stefano Modena, just losing a place to Emanuele Pirro in his Audi. And the Audis are going to have to be, shall we say, robust in their driving to try and stay with the pace of these leading 2-wheel drive cars. The front drivers, the Peugeots and the Hondas, and the rear drivers, the BMWs. The 2 bright yellow cars there, those are Audis as well, run by the private Abt team, ex-Formula 3 driver Christian Abt. There he is, running the team for himself again this year, and being joined this time as well by a second driver, Chris Nissen. And Nissen, the Danish driver, a greatly experienced saloon and sports car racer, and joining Abt in the team. And disappointingly for Audi, they are the quickest of the Audis. Quicker than the Works team's 4 cars are the privateer Abt cars, and that's largely because they run on Yokohamas and they work better than the Dunlops of the Works teams. Kindly pointing out, of course, that there is no such thing as unlimited traction with 4-wheel drive even. Is Christian Abt there out braking himself. They're feeling the pressure as well, and the youngster just outdoing himself on the brakes. Back to the race, however, and at the front of the field, Laurent Aeo leads, and sandwiched between the 2 Peugeots is Johnny Cicotto, the Venezuelan's BMW. And in 4th place, behind Jorg van Ommen in the 2nd of the Peugeots, is Jochen Winkelhock. Van Ommen, his first drive for Peugeot, and qualified extremely well indeed. This was, in fact, the qualifying situation with the Peugeots. First and second initially, then first one BMW, that of Winkelhock, and then right in the death, the second BMW of Cicotto, splitting the 2 on the grid. Into the pits goes Leopold von Bayern, his Team Isert BMW, one of the horde of private BMWs here, and he and his young teammate Christian Menzel both qualified extremely well indeed. They were right up in the top 10 for almost all the qualifying session. They ran together to help tow each other around. Von Bayern in the end was bumped down in the death to 20th place, but Menzel 7th on the grid, and the youngster in his early 20s, just coming in from single-seater racing, his first season in touring cars, very much touted around the German paddocks as a man to watch. Another man to watch, of course, always the Italian Emanuele Pirro. He's always very dramatic, he's always very flamboyant in and out of the car, and walking around all weekend with his goofy cap on, looking as if he didn't have a care in the world. Far from the truth, I'm afraid. He is, after all, an Audi driver. Well, there you are, slow-mo of that cone taking a bit of a beating right on the apex of the chicane there. These chicanes, the 2-litre cars really hopping over them at quite some velocity, of course, without too much to worry about losing downforce. All they've got to do is make sure they don't thump the suspension too hard. Cicotto and the rest dropping away. Laurent Ayeau's running away with this one. Van Ormen doing a very solid job there in third place. So behind them, Winkelhock fourth, Alfred Hager and Marco Werner in the two Hondas. They qualified extremely well indeed in reverse order to that. Hager was sixth on the grid, Werner was fifth, but that reflects their speed towards the end of last season as well. Like in the British series, the Hondas really started to come good here in Germany at the end of the year. Just behind them then, the yellow Abt car of Chris Nissen and Christian Menzel. Then is Abt himself, then the first of the Nissan Primeras, and that's Sascha Maassen. And he's got Uwe Alsen right behind him. So Uwe Alsen, his first drive in a 2-litre car, his first race drive at least, one of a number of drivers in this year's grid coming down from the Class 1 cars, and all of them with the same story. These two-wheel drive cars, they said, they've got no power. Well, 300 and odd, 310 in some cases, perhaps. Brake horsepower would seem enough to you or me, but when you're used to a Class 1 car, that really is negligible. Uwe Alsen there, belying the fact that this is the first time in a long while he's raced without traction control or ABS as well. So they're getting used to a very different style of driving, and Alsen, well, he's picking it up fairly quickly here as well. Now Cecotto really under pressure, because pushing along that little group from the back is Joachim Winkelhock, and he is really trying to up the pace, and make no mistake about it, the slipstreaming effect on this Grand Prix circuit for these cars is very noticeable indeed. You could really see it in qualifying when you can get a toe down any of the straights. Any one will do, but this last one into the stadium section is best. If you can get a toe off anybody, you can pick up a good half second in your lap time. It's so noticeable in qualifying that drivers on their own couldn't match their times when they'd been getting a toe off a teammate or any other car that was going quickly. Laurent Ayeau, however, to belie that, is running away, as we said. And now just starting after that run through the stadium complex there to open up a couple of lengths of breathing space for himself is Johnny Cecotto. Van Ormen being pushed from behind, undoubtedly. He's looking in the mirrors all the time there. He could see the BMW had moved over far to his left, and he wanted to know why. Well, Joachim was using everything that wasn't actually green to try and get the car around the corner. But Winkelhock, well, if this was the battle for the lead, you'd say it was all close enough, were it not for Laurent Ayeau, just a few yards further ahead. 2.7 seconds back to Cecotto. And these cars on the Grand Prix circuit, compared to a Formula 1 car on this expanse of long, fast, straighter course, they look dead slow. But don't be misled, the top speeds of the fastest cars, and they're painted yellow, don't worry too much about that. Top speeds of the Peugeots and the other cars, right up at 260 kilometers an hour through the speed trap on the longest section of straight. And in real money, that's 160 miles an hour, 160. Granted, the Grand Prix cars will touch 320, 325 on the longer sections here, but they are not, of course, built from production body shells. These cars are built from production body shells, highly modified, obviously, and the running gear much modified as well to produce that whopping power. There is Poldi, Prince Leopold von Bayern, just going out of shot there and being chased by the leader. Not quite sure why Johnny Cecotto's got his wiper on, just bored, I guess. Manuel Reuter, of course, last year's Class 1 ITC champion, and staying with Opel but stepping down. This is one of the Schmidt Motorsport Opels. See, he's already got a stone chip broken windscreen right in front of his line of sight, chasing down Emanuele Pirro. And for Reuter, the sequential gearbox and the fact that it's got a steering wheel, probably about the only thing that remains at least vaguely similar to last year's car. Michael Basel's just ahead of him. As we said, 6 Opels run by 3 different teams in this championship. And Bartel's one of the rival Opel cars. So Laurent Ayeau still leading it. Battle's going on all the way down the field, and some real slipstreaming, as you can see, going on there. Emanuele Pirro diving into the chicane ahead of Stefano Modena. That's one area where the four-wheel drive traction abilities of the Audis is not completely redundant now, although they are a lot heavier. They've still got that extra driveline braking capacity above the Alfa. And interestingly, right behind the Alfa there was Yvan Muller, former French touring car champion, raced for Audi last year in Italy in the four-wheel drive machine, and he was brought in to test and then to race the two-wheel drive Audi, the front-wheel drive version of the A4 Quattro. Of course, at the end of 1997, front-wheel drive ceases to be an option for Audi and indeed everyone else as it becomes illegal. But at the moment they're running the two-wheel drive car just as an experimental basis, and unfortunately for Audi, the experiment rather turned out to be better than the goods they've got at the moment. It out-qualified all the other works cars. In fact, it was only beaten on the grid by one of the Abt Audi, no, in fact, not even by the Abt Audis on the grid. It looked to be slightly slower than the Abt privateer cars, but in fact, Yvan Muller qualified himself 8th on the grid in the two-wheel drive Audi. And the question for Audi is now not whether they will race the two-wheel drive car in full strength this year, but rather when. So away from the lead four we go. And here we've got the Hondas, Alfred Hager with comfortable breathing space, but Marco Werner under big pressure from Chris Nissen. Looking back now from the Audi, there is Stefano Modena, and Stefano Modena and Christian Danner's Alphas, quite some revelation. They've come away from a year layoff in the championship. We haven't seen them in England for a while either, but they've come back here and they've looked reasonably competitive for a car that doesn't actually have an official works department doing any development work on it. The 155 is still looking quite effective. Pirro accelerating away as you would expect from the tight stadium section, and look at that, Yvan Muller trying to pull out of the slipstream. Well, he's not close enough to try anything into the first corner, but Yvan Muller having a look around the Alfa at least. The two Nissan Primeras right behind, Sascha Maassen and his new teammate Roland Asch. Asch, another refugee from the defunct Class 1 series. And just look at this for a slipstreamer. 5 cars, nose to tail behind Emanuele Pirro, and then Christian Danner towing along another 4 behind him. This is great slipstreaming. And then they all fan out. There's smoke at the chicane, so already there's been some late braking just ahead of them. They all fan out, looking for an option under braking. And as you can see, Pirro's got it all firmly sewn up there. Danner, the little queue behind him as well. But it's patience, patience, patience here as this race continues. 8 laps of this long circuit. And we'll be back for more of the action after this break. So here we are, Emanuele Pirro guarding his position against the attack of Stefano Modena. Midway through this first 50-kilometer race, the 8-lap sprint race. Then there's a 10-minute breathing off period before a cooling off period before the drivers go at it again for 100 kilometers. That's 61, 62 miles of the circuit. And that means that there is a degree of self-preservation going on, especially in the sprint race when you think about making daft overtaking maneuvers. Drivers have to start this race, incidentally, on the tyres on which they qualified, which effectively rules out qualifying specials. And therefore you have to think on Saturday long and hard about what the weather might do on Sunday, how tyre wear might be affecting you. Jörg van Ommen betwixt the BMW pair. Leopold von Bayern not second now, miraculously. He is in 1 lap down standing, just ahead of this group. He was into the pits earlier, we saw that, with a punctured tyre, left rear puncture, and so he's now just been lapped by Aeo, and will have his mirrors full of Johnny Cecotto in a chicane or two's time. And Poldi, being the gentleman he is, will undoubtedly move right out of the way and let them through. So Cecotto will reach there first. He's still got this little 2 or 3 length advantage over Van Ommen, and Van Ommen entirely concerned with keeping Jochen Winkelhock at bay, I think, as opposed to trying to reel in Cecotto and challenge him. Behind them, still the 2 Hondas, Alfred Hager and Marco Werner, 5th and 6th. You occasionally get a flash of Hager. There he is, and he's opened a little gap away to Werner. Werner with Chris Nissen, the Abt Audi behind him, in 7th place, and Christian Menzel. Their relation to our Nige, spelt differently as well. There's the order then, the top 6 unchanged. Aeo, Cecotto, Van Ommen and Winkelhock, as you can see them. But the gap opening up a little. Cecotto with the headlights on, just to make sure, as if Von Bayern didn't know. Jörg Van Ommen thinking about trying to take advantage of that in the hope that maybe Cecotto would be left a little bit wrong-footed by the presence of the privateer BMW, but not so. Winkelhock has the headlights on, well, a headlight on at least. I don't know if there's some kidology in that, trying to psych out Van Ommen. No, he switched them off again, so Van Ommen now on the brakes and just has Cecotto's scythe across his nose. The Venezuelan, supremely experienced, of course, in these cars chiefly, and very successfully. Van Ommen still really finding his feet, but you can see from the speed of the Peugeots that were Van Ommen a little more experienced in these 2-litre cars, then Cecotto and Winkelhock would very likely be having a battle all on their own, and Cecotto would be dutifully following along behind Laurent Aeo, his team leader. As it is, though, it gives us moments of excitement and interest like that, and despite that lunging thrust of Van Ommen being rebuffed by Cecotto, he's still hard at it, and Winkelhock using the mud now in an effort to get round the first corner without problems. So too behind him is Alfred Hager, and Alfred Hager seemingly staying on the grass. And behind them again, just a little flash of the second Honda of Marco Werner really coming under sustained aggressive assault from Chris Nissen. Brake lights, you'll notice, on the back of the Van Ommen Peugeot seem to be disconnected in the BMWs. Either that or Johnny Cecotto is not using the brakes. So a little replay here. Contact between one of the Alphas. Is that Christian Danner? It is. And Alexander Bergstaller in the Opel Vectra. So Bergstaller and Danner making contacts. Well, one hit one and then the other hit him back. Not quite sure exactly where you'd want to place the blame for that one, but the Holzer Opel certainly off it and in the dirt. And it looks as though Danner continued. Another look at least for Van Ommen. And smoke in the background behind them. Let's see who comes through in this long shot. It looks so close at this stage. Well, no, there's a problem for one of the Hondas, I think. Looks as though we have lost one of the Hondas. Meanwhile, Van Ommen having another look at Cecotto. He really does seem to be able to close up on that long section coming down to the stadium. And then the rear drive BMW just perhaps a little more handleable through this section, certainly in qualifying. Laurent Aeo was looking most spectacular, particularly there in that sharp left hand of the bank's corner. He was drifting the car in sideways, well, chucking the car in sideways perhaps more accurately, really like a rally car, keeping the steering almost dead straight and just flicking it to hurl the car in. Broadside he was going through the corner and then gunning the engine all the way through, keeping the revs up and trying to get the power down. So victory then in the first race goes to the Peugeot from the two BMWs. And in 5th place, Chris Nissen. So he did in fact lose the Honda. Marco Werner in 6th place. Christian Menzel, Abt, Alsen and Modena.
Yes, for sure. Reach first place and third place in the first race. It was fantastic because we was the first in the qualification, we was the first in the free practice, and then to be first in the first race is opportunity for a good thing, but we must wait for the second race.
Indeed, and waiting for the second race will be the Bugatti squad, the BMW crews.
No, it's not bad, but
close.
the other guy was too quick. I couldn't follow.
All right, but things looked, you had to fight a lot with Van Omen toward the end.
Yeah, it was. He was catching me at the end of the straight, and I had a hard time to keep him behind.
So right behind him, of course, Jörg van Ommen. Let's see what he had to say about it all.
For my first battle in a front-wheel driven car, it was really hard because I had to brake very late, and that was not so easy for me, but I do not want to risk too much. I think in some situations there was the possibility for me to overpass, but it would be risky, and this is a short race, and I think I have to be a little bit more intelligent, and so I have to be careful in the first race, and maybe I can now more attack.
It's still a little bit of a learning process then.
It's a real learning process, I tell you.
Well, Van Ommen obviously delighted with the way things are going so far, and a very...
It's a great race for us. It's good to start like this the season, and I hope that we will continue in that way. But as I say, next race is more difficult for us because it's a short track, and for the traction and everything, I think the car will be less constant during the race, so we will be more in trouble than that race.
So, Ayer leads the points, of course. More for Winkelhock because he won the second, did better in the second race where you get more
I
points.
had the experience from the past years in England. The start is more or less in such a championship, in such a competitive championship, more or less the result for the race. And I was a little bit tired at the first race. Really, I missed the start. So I started as fourth and I finished as fourth. And so my whole concentration was for the second race. I did a good start. Was a little bit heavy against my teammate Johnny Cecotto, but anyway, I was second and I could finish second position. So this was my target for the weekend because the package, the compromise from Peugeot was here in Hockenheim in such a top speed circuit was the best solution.